All right. And now, for anyone who's watching, I'm going to hit go live on my, you can't see it off screen here, but my phone, I'm going to go live on TikTok at the same time. And now I'm live on TikTok. This feels very, very meta right now. Live on TikTok so people can see the screen and see us doing live here and see this. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. Anyway. Hey, dude. How's it going?
Hey, man. It's good to see you.
You too. It's been a week. It's been a week
Yes.
without Star Wars talk. Us talking Star Wars, and I missed it, man. I missed it.
I missed it too. I'm so excited because we get to do it 2 times this week.
Yes.
For anybody that's joining us, obviously it's always great when we can have you like and subscribe to the channel. But if you're looking for a double dose of the Kessel chat, or I should just say Jeff and I, we are also going to be on another show, Jeff, which you helped to organize. That's going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah. Super jazzed. We're going to be on a show called Pop Goes the Stream tomorrow at 12 p.m. Pacific on YouTube, which is going to be super rad. Some friends of mine who are live streamers, Robert and Zante. It's going to be fantastic. And we're just going to be talking about our show, Star Wars, and all kinds of other fun stuff that we find interesting. So it'll be a good time. It's pretty exciting. We've had this neat little rotation of like guests coming on the show, which we'll have another guest back next week, as well as being able to go on to other people's shows too and talk about it. So this is really cool. It feels nice to get the Kessel chat. I mean, us, you and I specifically, but the Kessel chat as a thing, a community building group into more places where we can meet and engage with the community. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I like that. We've had a lot of we've had guests most recently from Dark Side Divas.
Awesome.
We've had guests on our show. We are going to be on a show tomorrow at noon Pacific, which is also great. So if you find that Thursdays at 9 p.m. Pacific is just, maybe it's cutting into that, that late evening time, you can catch us tomorrow at noon Pacific, and we can definitely drop in the link. And if you follow the Kessel chat on Twitter or any of our channels, or Jeff or I, you can learn more about where we're going to be tomorrow.
Exactly. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I will, here in a few minutes when I find the link, I'll go drop it in the chat so everyone can have it, and we'll have it in the comments later on too, so it can be totally available in the future. Yeah. And then for anyone interested, if anyone is watching from TikTok, I'm also live streaming on TikTok right now, the show while we do this. So for anyone out there saying, just say hi. Ryan can't quite see it, and people on the show can't quite see Ryan, and you won't, unfortunately, everyone watching on TikTok is not going to hear Ryan, but that's okay. So you can always go, if you're watching TikTok, you can also go onto YouTube. I know this is very weird, like you're back and forth the 2 cameras at the same time. But you can go over to YouTube and catch us live. Anyway, it's super fun.
Right on. That'll be awesome.
And my wife just said, this is you, this is you, this is you, send.
That's like depth, that's a axiom right there.
It is. It really
this is you, send.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. All right. Shall we get jumped into it?
Let's do it, man. This will be a lot of fun.
Let's do this. Oh, that is not me. Hold on.
Hey.
There we go.
Whoa.
Try that again. There we are. We're back to the 2 panes. It's wild.
Right on. Yeah, it's good stuff.
I got everything reset up for tonight. So we had Chris on the show from Dark Side Divas and Marvelous Divas last week, which was super fun. Yes. And then a few weeks before that, we had Brian on, which was also really cool. And for anyone watching, we've had this neat little set of luck where we've got some people in the Star Wars community who want to be on the show and kind of join us. So we're doing this a little bit of rotation. So Ryan and I are going to be here like we normally are, talking every other week or so. And then every couple of weeks, we're also going to have a guest on to join us for whatever topic we've got. And it's really cool because we've got a lot of awesome Star Wars content coming up in the next, month or two, let alone in the next 6 months.
I think we have a lot of really cool content to talk about, but can I just also say that it's a great time to be like a sci-fi fan?
Oh, totally.
I know that there's a lot of people that are upset about like the Rings of Power, which is a new Lord of the Rings Tolkien-based Amazon series that's going to be coming out in 2 weeks. Lower Decks, Star Trek Lower Decks is going to be coming back in a couple of weeks, or I think in just days now. And of course, we have a lot of new Star Wars stuff that's coming out. But if I'm right, and I could be wrong about this, but I think you talked last week that you and Shanna were watching Sandman.
Yes.
Is And I think you
Oh,
all were watching Westworld
we
too.
were.
I feel like this has been like the summer of sci-fi,
It
and,
is.
and fantasy, like some really great content.
It has been fantastic. So yeah, Westworld capped off 2 Sundays ago. That was or maybe it was this last Sunday was the season finale. The last Sunday. This last Sunday was the season finale of Westworld, I believe. I know there's a lot of people out there who have mixed reviews about the mixed feelings about it. I absolutely loved it. We've been watching the series since it began, and I really love how the story's played out. But yes,
Big fan of the show.
yeah, Jonathan Nolan and Lisa, is it Lisa Joy? I think is his partner's name.
Yeah,
They do a fantastic job with the storytelling. And afterwards, when you watch the behind the scenes segment from every episode, listening to the two of them, even more so, listening to the two of them describe why the episode played out the way it did reinforces for me every time, like, yes, I love the show. Because whether you agree with how the story is going or not, you can listen to the two of them and realize everything they did and they wrote and put together is for a reason in storytelling. And you have brought this up many times, and we've talked about it on the show many times, that character arcs need to develop in the way they need to develop. They need to end or begin the way they need to begin. We don't always like it, but when good storytellers do it, you end up with a good story. And that's the point of things like Westworld and now Sandman. And Sandman, you know what? I have the print book or the first half of I think the releases on my shelf back here someplace. And it follows pretty darn close to that. Like there are some subtle differences and things like that, but it is really close to the actual the comics and the graphic novel and the trades and stuff like that came out a long time ago, like 20, 30 years ago at this point. Now I think like God, late 80s and 90s is when this originally started being printed. So it follows it amazingly well, and I'm thoroughly enjoying the casting, the writing, the cinematography. It's all beautiful in this show.
yeah, and I don't think a lot of people know that. If I'm right, Sandman is like a DC product,
It
so
is.
they
Mhm.
randomly have like I don't want to spoil anything in it, but some very famous DC characters happen to appear in Sandman, if I'm correct.
I think you're right. So like John Constantine show. I don't know if
Hmm.
that character was DC or not, but
Oh yeah, because he's in the Dark Justice League.
okay. So John Constantine is in the graphic novel along with Joanna Constantine, his sister or his cousin. John
Hmm.
is not in the TV series, but Joanna is, and is featured prominently in at least two different episodes. Which is falls exactly in line with what the story is playing out to be. It doesn't really matter that John's not there and Joanna is. It makes no difference. Sorry, it doesn't. There's a lot of differences, but it it fits with the story really nicely. And by the way, small nod. I absolutely love that the actress they got to play Joanna Constantine played. Oh, what was the
She's it's Jenna Coleman. She right?
Jenna
She's
Coleman, one of the
the
Doctor's
assistant.
companions. What was
Yeah,
her
one of
name
the
though?
yeah, she
Oh, I'm blanking on her name.
she's the Impossible Girl,
The Impossible Girl. Yes.
Clara Oswald.
Clara Oswald. Thank you, Clara.
Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, the first time I saw her on screen, I was like, "Oh my god, that's Clara Oswald!" Like, because that's all I can think of her now for. But yes, she does a fantastic job as she actually plays two different versions of her character, one as the modern version and an older version as well in the show. It's beautiful, like done a fantastic job. The casting is just amazing. The acting is amazing. Like everything about the Sandman is just fantastic.
So if I can ask you, because again, like we're gonna get to catching up on Star Wars, but there's a small lull right now. There's
Yes.
this little break,
Hmm.
and Sandman is just been released. What's the thing that attracted you to this? I know you're also a Neil Gaiman
Hmm.
fan. This is one of his properties. Um, I just got done rereading 1602, which is an amazing Marvel property that he wrote. But what is it like if you were to say, hey, like here's a fun thing you can do between Star Wars shows, why Sandman?
Fantastic question. Um, Several reasons, to be honest. A couple geeky reasons that are just simple, not superficial, but just simple. Of I had been hearing about Sandman as a property and as a storyline for a decade or more. Never read it. And then one day I had the opportunity at my local comic book shop to buy a hardbacked version of the graphic novel that it covers like the first 5 or 6 issues in the original series. Um, I think it makes it up through about the point that we are now, in maybe a little bit further along in the season, or probably maybe as far as it's going to go in this season. And so when I heard that they were making this, there was two parts to this. One is I'm excited because you're right. I'm a big Neil Gaiman fan, and I had bought the book a couple of years ago and read through some part of it. I need to finish reading and buy more, but I'm like, oh, I'm excited. I want to see adaptations. I love watching adaptations, especially of comic books, but in general, I want to see an adaptation. I want to see how do they adapt this to a screen. And adding on to that, I was so beyond disappointed, and I continue to be beyond disappointed with how they adapted the show creators of American Gods adapted that Neil Gaiman property into a TV show. Like, I can't tell you, no, that's not true. I can tell you there are two times when I have been so disappointed in something that, like, I've walked out of a theater one time for a movie, and it was an adaptation of Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slayer or Vampire Hunter.
Yeah,
I walked out of that movie because the book, the book is amazing. Like, it is a fantastic story that is serious. It's not meant to be comical or anything. It's serious. It's not a big action adventure story anyway, either. And when you watch the movie, it's like, this is terrible. I don't know what this is, but this is not the book. It is, I couldn't stand it, and I walked out. It's the only movie I've ever walked out of. American Gods, I watched a couple seasons hoping that it would just get better, hoping that they'd get to the beard, so to speak, and they'd get there, and they never did. And then I realized American Gods is one book that's like a couple hundred pages long. It's not a complicated or deep book. It leaves out a lot of the world building intentionally to just tell this one story. And the TV show failed so terribly. Neil Gaiman actually wasn't even involved in creating that show. He's actually said many times he had nothing to do with making that show. So when I heard that he was part of making this show, and then saw some interviews of him, like how proud he is of this show, I'm like, I want to watch this. Whatever it's going to be, I want to watch it because Neil Gaiman is there, and he's going to help make sure, knowing who the little I do know about him, he's going to help ensure that whatever we see on screen will at least stick to the story elements that are the most important for the story to be told. So, anyway, those are the got friends joining the show.
I have a little visitor that's joining me right now.
We have new guests on the show. It's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. I'm getting a whole readout on a bug that's in our house right now, so I apologize.
Of course, that makes total sense. There are bugs in Star Wars. This is what it's like doing shows at home, and it's okay.
Exactly.
So, to your point, what Westworld and Sandman and all that are fantastic fillers. Like, not fillers, but they're great stories in and of themselves, and they fit really nicely in this gap. How about you? Like, have you been watching Westworld or Sandman or any of these?
I'm a big fan of Westworld. I'm a big fan of Westerns. And a thing that growing up in the country that always used to think that was funny. And I'm sorry, by the way, if you heard me yelling across my house as my family came running. I hope I went on mute for that.
You were good.
Oh, excellent. Good deal. I have 5 kids, everybody. It's a lot of work. And I have to say, I have an amazing partner that makes it happen. So I love Westerns. But I love a certain amount of, and I know this is going to sound funny because it's a science fiction Western show, Westworld. But there is a quality to that show that has a certain amount of realism, which is the costumes. Some of the costuming is just amazing. There was a thing that in the country where with people that I grew up with, people always used to point out when someone was wearing a white shirt or light colored clothes in a movie or a Western, because you would never wear that's not something you would ever have. You would always have dark clothes because of how dirty you were going to get. So you couldn't get something that was a white shirt, for example. But a thing that I always had too was something that would go around my neck that I could pull up over my nose. If you were out on a horse, if you were out in out in a field or something, so that way you could breathe and not have stuff kicked up at you. And that was one of the first things that I noticed about Westworld, was how much went into just the look of it. It looked great. And so and of course I loved the characterization. And it's I was not a fan of the original Yul Brynner Westworld. Um, I think it's a really smart idea, but I also think that Michael Crichton was just putting out a ton of crazy stuff back then. He put out Westworld. There's also Future World, which is a little watched sequel to Westworld, which is like a crazier movie. And I think that Jonathan Nolan and his team that he worked with, he's the guy that also came up with Memento. He
Mhm.
came up with the idea of Memento, and then Chris Nolan, his brother, is a very famous director brother, made Memento, and it was one of the things that like kicked off their careers. It was, they did Following, Memento, Insomnia, Inception. Jonathan Nolan's this like brilliant story person. And so I like where this went because I like this intersection
Mhm.
of the Old West and technology and the inhumanity of the Old West and our inhumanity in how we perceive technology.
Mhm.
Like a thing that I'm obsessing about right now is that bot and that and I think it's a Facebook engineer or a meta engineer is saying is sentient, that the bot has achieved self-awareness, and it's like it's stuff like Westworld. It's like, it's almost showing us like a glimpse of a not that far off future
Mhm.
that I'm like, oof, we got to
Yeah.
get ready.
Yeah. Seriously. Um, yeah, it's a lot of good stuff, but not but to kind of and to transition a little bit. What we wanted to spend tonight talking about, and all these good stories that Brian brought up are a fantastic lead into this because there are a lot of good stories coming for Star Wars in the next
Yes.
month, let alone the next 6 months. And what we really
Yeah.
wanted to give everyone a chance to do tonight is kind of ask some questions, but also for the two of us to be able to give all of you our take on how could you get caught up. So whether you are like us, fully caught up into books, comics, movies, TV shows, all of that stuff on one end of the spectrum. On the same spectrum, the other end could be you haven't watched Star Wars in years, or you've never watched anything Star Wars in years. Like, I heard about a show coming up. I don't know. Maybe I'll check it out. Maybe that might be interesting. And anywhere in between in that spectrum. What we wanted to do tonight is spend a little bit of time just talking about how could you get yourself in the door. And that doesn't have to just be getting fully prepped for Andor or Ahsoka or the Bad Batch, but how to just get yourself kind of get the pump primed a little bit for there's some hotness coming up in Star Wars, and we want to talk about that a little bit. What could you get yourself into to just get even kind of excited about what these new shows and books and things like that might actually look like? So I guess, Ryan, I wanted to start with you. I'll turn the tables a bit because oftentimes you have these really good questions or ideas to start the conversation off with. But I want to give it to you to kind of talk everyone through where do you think people should start right now? Whether they've gotten fully and already into Star Wars or they want to kind of dip their toe in water a little bit and figure out, do I even want to invest any time into this stuff that's coming up?
So I've done a lot of research on the Andor show, and if I'm right, the Andor show is a bit of a spy thriller type of show. And I'm really excited about that because I think that that's like a great genre, and there's all these cool tropes that Star Wars is going to be able to examine. But to your point, I thought of all the different ways that people could be coming to this show. And the first thing that I thought of was, um, there is Diego Luna is a pretty big a casting win for this role as Cassian Andor. And by the way, like I've been noticing too, like there's been a little bit of talk about the name Andor, that it's and or, that it's the genius of and tyranny of or, that it's this. I just thought that was really interesting that someone pointed that out, and I was like, oh wow, that's a cool. I didn't even realize that there was like kind of a concept there already in the name. But Diego Luna plays Cassian Andor, and I thought of opportunities to learn about, see some good movies that he is in. and a movie that he is in with Gail Garcia Bernal that is also done by Alfonso Cuarón, which is an amazing movie, is called Y Tu Mama Tambien. It is not a movie for families. It is definitely a movie that you cannot sit down with your kids and watch. But it is a great movie if you have never seen this actor before and would like to see other things, like why is he such a good actor. That is the movie that really launched his career. And so I thought I actually made a bunch of notes. I would recommend that. If you are someone who's like, I I'm really interested in kind of a thriller type show that's Star Warsian, but I need to like kind of get myself ready. I have some fun homework assignments. And I thought, oh, um, you should watch The Dirty Dozen, which again, not a kids movie. It definitely has some moments in there, some triggering moments. 3 Days of the Condor, and The Conversation. And each one of those is from a time of like either the 60s military operation that goes well and poorly all at once, which is The Dirty Dozen, and then 70s thrillers that came out right before Star Wars came out. And that could kind of help set the mood for you to then get into Andor. But of course, and Jeff, I'm sure that you probably would recommend this too. If you haven't seen Rogue One, this is a thing that you should watch before you then go and see Andor. I feel like that's like a required homework assignment. But my last thing that I thought, Jeff, and I'd love to hear what you think is, if you were a really big fan, you were a really, really big fan of Star Wars already, and you already watched Rogue One, and you're also super hyped for Andor. The thing that I'd actually recommend doing, and this is to any fan, it's very easy to find a copy of Dark Forces online. Dark Forces is a video game that came out in the early 1990s. And if you remember things like Wolfenstein or Doom, this was Star Wars' version of that. And it's excuse me, it's cool because it was Rogue One before Rogue One existed.
Mm-hmm.
It was the original story on how the Death Star plans were recovered.
Mm-hmm.
But what's super fun about it is that many of the things in um, uh, uh, Dark Forces, like Dark Troopers, or even some of the way that the plans are being stored, and the secrecy and the spying and the subterfuge, all those things that you see now, they are from that video game.
Mm-hmm.
And so, excuse me, if you're coming from any of those backgrounds, I kind of wanted to come up with a lot of different ways, but I really wanted to push the, if you want to get in the mood for Andor, and I could keep going, Jeff. I've got like 10 movies that I would say these are things that I would watch to prep to get into the mood, because I can already see the stuff that they're starting to borrow from those movies. Like even Dirty Dozen, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
Dirty Dozen stuff was reused in Rogue One. Um, I can see it in Andor. So I'm eager to hear your list. What would you
Oh,
recommend someone
good
watch and
question.
do?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a bit, and a couple I wanted to add it to your list because you triggered some thoughts to me while you were talking. One of the ones that might be interesting to check out would be Last Man Standing, which is actually a remake of Yojimbo. Um, I think that could be an interesting one too because it's not exactly the spy thriller, but there's elements of that. For anyone who doesn't know, Last Man Standing is a movie with Bruce Willis. I don't remember when it was made, but in recent memory, last 20, 30 years. And it's a remake
Yeah.
of Yojimbo, which is a Japanese film from back in the 50s, I think, or something to that effect. Or the
Which is
60s.
which is a remake of A Fistful of Dollars.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Um,
Yes. Yeah, and they're fantastic, and it has that sort of spy double playing element to it as well, which
Yes,
could be kind of interesting to get ready for that. I was
high
also,
tension.
yeah, and I was also thinking not just for Andor, but like for the Bad Batch and them. I was also thinking the Magnificent Seven would be a really good, or Seven Samurai. Either one, whatever your preference happened to like the original version of Magnificent Seven. I actually am really fond of the current remake of Magnificent Seven. I think it's a really, really fun film to watch. But Seven Samurai, I think, is also a great way to capture that same exact energy. But that could be interesting for shows like The Bad Batch too, because to get you ready for if you haven't seen season one of The Bad Batch, it can get you ready for the style of storytelling that is being taking place in this. That people are making sacrifices, but to help the greater good, even if they're struggling with how to actually do that and not sure how to do that. I was actually thinking sticking in the realm of the ones I was going to think of are sticking in the realm of Star Wars are
Mhm.
one is actually to go watch Solo. If you haven't watched Solo or
I
or
like that.
I'm like
I really like that.
yeah, or see what I did there? And or you have seen Solo, but you haven't seen it in a while and you had some sort of emotions about it, good, bad, indifferent. Go rewatch it. And the reason I bring that one up is like Andor, Solo also shows you another way to view how real people in a galaxy that are dealing with oppression, in this case, a heavily fascist regime. But as we've discussed before, the galaxy is huge. And even the Empire tends to focus primarily in the core and the mid rim. Even the outer rim and the wild space, they don't tend to patrol near as heavily, and they don't focus on quite as much because it's a lot of territory. And so people generally in a galaxy like this only encounter the Empire, depending on where they live, in different shapes and sizes, some more and some less. And I think Solo is a really great way to get an idea of what do a small number of people who are trying to really make their way through the galaxy in the best way they can think of to do it, whether we agree with their lifestyle or not, doesn't really matter. This is the way they found that makes sense for them, and they're going to make it work because they see what's happening in the rest of the galaxy. And I know a lot of people have mixed feelings about it. I happen to absolutely love Solo. I think it's a great story and it's fun. I love seeing this character at an early stage in his life and the others around him. We get a lot of side characters, not side characters, but main characters like Kira that come out of it that we've seen a whole run in the Crimson Reign subplot in comic books, as
Yeah.
well as the crossover event. She also appears in a lot of Dr. Aphra and Darth Vader comics. It's a great story, I think, in general, but it's a really good one to give you a sense of another person's take on how to approach dealing with a heavily fascist regime or a heavily oppressive regime in your galaxy, and how do you make that work. Cassian and the people in his lot and the people in Andor are going to approach it in one way. But I think Solo is also very akin to the Bad Batch in that they're taking a different way, a different approach to this. Not that they're not taking it head on, but they're just going to work with it a little bit differently than somebody like Cassian Andor and others in Mon Mothma and Bail Organa in that side of things. These folks are going to do this a little bit differently. They're going to approach it a little differently.
Yeah.
I would say even to that end, Star Wars Rebels is also another really good show. If you haven't watched the series, it's a really good one for a whole host of reasons. But in this case specifically, it's yet another way that some people decide to make a difference in a galaxy where no one feels like they can make a difference. And because even when the Rebels starts out, they are they are their own little group that isn't really part of anything bigger formally. Maybe they help out periodically, but they're just their own little group of people who might know of other cells of people doing something similar, but they don't work together. And so I think it's a really interesting show, even if you just watch the first couple seasons, to get a sense of yet another group of people trying to rub against the grain of an oppressive society or repressive regime to make life better for even a small number of people, which is what Cassian is trying to do in his own way. And I think it's yet another interesting take on what would it be like for real people living in this galaxy dealing with the Empire, and what might lead people to the decisions they make. Some people make decisions like Cassian and others to go that path. Other people like Harrison Dula and Kanan Jarrus and Ezra Bridger make different decisions. They're not bad, they're not good. They're just different in different approaches. And I think that can really shape the story that we're about to see in Andor and then in the Bad Batch And then even taking that beyond that to Tales of the Jedi and Ahsoka and all these other, all these other pieces of content we're going to see over the next 6 to 7 months, or maybe 9, 10 months. Um, yeah, that's kind of where my head's at right now.
No, I really wanted to try to do. I like that because I was thinking of all these things, and that's why I even came up with like dark forces. But even then, I was
Oh
trying to
yeah,
think of like outs. excuse me, excuse me, outside of the box. Like I really wanted to think about like art often will inspire other art. And when I was watching the Mon Mothma scenes from
mm,
the trailer, and when I was watching the Cassian scenes, and even that line, you know how you know how you get in, you act like you've always been here. Um, there was a part of me that just kept thinking of political thrillers, like especially with Mon Mothma, especially with the Stellan Skarsgård character. I kept thinking of these political thrillers, and that's why I even had on my list of recommendations. John Hurt made a 1984, a version of 1984, a movie, the 1984 movie, and it is a powerful movie to
it
watch.
is.
And I thought of you were talking about how people live under oppression and how you try to shake off those shackles. And that movie is, and the book for that matter, 1984, it really inspires a lot of the things that we then see. The whole the idea of controlling knowledge and information, the importance of an oppressive society to make people think that ignorance is strength, um, the power of the quote unquote strong man leader. These are things that come out of 1984 that then really you see are appearing not just in other Star Wars properties, but definitely in Andor. But I just kept thinking of these like 1970s political thrillers, like 3 Days of the Condor, which I think is easier to watch, or All the President's Men, both of which star Robert Redford. He's amazing in them. Those are great movies. If you liked, and I was gonna, I know this is gonna sound funny, Jeff. I have this on my list to get ready for Andor. Captain America: Winter Soldier,
Yes.
because the Captain America: Winter Soldier is a movie about a guy who is trying to deal with the system from the inside out, and when he starts, is immediately set upon by the very system that he was a part of that's now trying to kill him, which is, by the way, 3 Days of the Condor, which is why Robert Redford is in both 3 Days of the Condor, he's Condor,
Hmm.
and also Winter Soldier. But I love the vibe I'm getting from the Andor show, because it reminds me too of a recent movie that I really, really like, because again, I love political thrillers, but I love high tension thrillers. And there is a movie and its remake, which are great. One of them is called Internal Affairs, and it is a, if I'm right, it's a Korean movie that was remade into a movie that Martin Scorsese directed called The Departed.
Oh yeah.
And
Okay.
The Departed is a movie about one person who's entering, like it's basically a story of two rats. A police, someone who's in the police that is posing as a criminal, so that way they can learn the criminal method, and someone who's a criminal that has worked their way into the police force, and then when they find out that they're both there, they're both having to figure out who's who, and they both have to get each other before the other one finds
Hmm.
out. And that's also the theme that I'm getting from this Andor trailer, that Andor is getting into the rebellion, but the way that he's doing that is by, subterfuge. And that to me also brought up one of my favorite parts of Obi-Wan with uh I believe her name is Indira, oh gosh, when she was having to pose as an empire,
Yo,
she was
yes.
in
Yeah.
episode the high tension of that, of getting found. So yeah, like all of these like 1970s psycho thrillers. I could add in the Parallax View, but that is a weird movie. But it's a part of the All the President's Men, 3 Days of the Condor, Parallax View are all made by the same director, and it's all part of like this like 1970s like psycho thrillers. But The Conversation, which is a Francis Ford Coppola movie, is amazing. It's like Gene Hackman at his best. I also have on my list The French Connection.
Oh
These
yeah.
are all movies that it's like it's thrillers, and that's what I think we're gonna get from Andor. So if you want to like drop, push on the gas for thrillers, that, and also cannot recommend it enough, The Departed. It is a hard movie to watch at times. It is high tension, but I think that we might get a Star Wars version of The Departed.
You may be right. I was also thinking. I've been thinking heavily that Andor reminds me a lot of like classic dystopian stories. To some degree, things like Logan's Run or Soylent Green, but really more of what I'm really thinking might be a good prep for this, or to get someone's head in the game of what type of story we might see that doesn't have to just be violence. Would be like a Fahrenheit 451, a Ray Bradbury. Like
Wow. Wow.
it's one of my favorite
I
books
love
of all
that.
time, and it's one of my. I love the movie because even in the movie, when there is conflict, it's not a lot of like active violent type conflict or like outward aggression between people. That does happen, but it's minimal because it doesn't really. It's not really necessary for the story. And I'm kind of hoping there's some sort of balance to that. I mean, there will clearly be physical violence that exists in Andor, and I think we can all understand why. But like you said with 1984, I think also with Fahrenheit 451, seeing this world where most everybody believes the world to be a particular way because that's what they've lived in for so long, or that's what they grew up in, that this is just the world they know, and then to start to learn that there actually was something else and there was something different and that it could be different. But like, like a Guy Montag in Fahrenheit 54, Fahrenheit 51, when he decides to leave this, spoiler alert, everyone, sorry, when he decides to leave the society, where he goes isn't like some, oh, hey, we're all over here hanging out. They are, but it's a tiny group of people that are struggling to still make it, but they're doing kind of the good work. And I won't tell you anybody the crux of it, but like they're not just off there and everything's happy go lucky and there they are. They're still struggling, but they've made the decision to go through this struggle because they know it's the right thing to do. And they finally they had that glass breaking moment where now I see the real world and I can't unsee it anymore. Like I can't not see that that's how the world is. But most everyone, this is just what they know, and so they just go with what they know because sometimes it is easier just to go with the flow, unfortunately. Um,
Yeah.
but I love,
Yeah.
you know what? I'm glad we're talking about it in this context, because when I came into the show tonight, I was really thinking, what other Star Wars properties can I think of to like get people excited about these shows? But I like how you took it this way because it makes it. I think it helps people realize that these are stories first and foremost. They're not Star
Hmm.
Wars; they're stories. They happen to be told under the banner of Star Wars characters and world building, but they're stories. And so what you have brought up, I think, is really amazing because it gives people the chance to approach something like Andor and the Bad Batch and then Ahsoka and Skeleton Crew and on. There's other properties that will come out, comic books or even other things like that, animated shows too.
Hmm.
It gives people the opportunity to look at these from a different perspective. It's not just going to watch Star Wars, and if you're sitting back saying to yourself, "I'm not a big Star Wars fan," that's no problem. Like you don't need to be, because what you can actually expect from these shows is a story first and
Yes.
foremost. Yes, it has the Star Wars label above it, but ignore that for a bit. It's a story. And if you go take some of your advice or my advice or input and go watch some of these other things that you've given or I've given, and then walk into one of these shows, you might be surprised how much you actually really enjoy it for just being a good story.
Yeah, and by the way, like I'm not saying too that some of this is like required reading before you like sit down and do this. I
Right.
I just think that, yeah, like your Fahrenheit 451 example is great because I think that we can't get away from the fact, and by the way, like every time I'm like, oh yeah, we're gonna get like a Departed Star Wars. I don't need my art to always, or the things that I'm imbibing or consuming. I don't need it to always be like something else. What I mean is that I love when someone builds on something,
Right.
whether it's a trope or a theme. And humans have been writing stories for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. So it's hard to find new ways to tell those stories. So I always look for how other stories will inform things. Like Yojimbo. Yojimbo informed Mandalorian. Yeah, like the spaghetti westerns come from Japanese films that those directors were watching, and then they made, and whether it was the Dollars trilogy, which, by the way, if you want to listen to a really excellent breakdown of the good, the bad, and the ugly, Red Letter Media, I think today just put a breakdown of the good, the bad, and the ugly. Jay and Rich Evans. But uh, the the it's great to have that context of these historical movies or books, because I think it adds to the enjoyment of the thing that you're watching. Like, I was watching something and someone said tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. And I was like, oh, and by the way, I'm going to be totally wrong. I'm going to say this and I could be wrong and someone's going to be like, this is not right. I was like, oh, that's Macbeth. I know that it's Shakespeare, but I think it's Macbeth. And I was like, oh, wow, like that's Macbeth. And I thought of at least what I think is that scene that's from Macbeth. And by the way, I always like confuse parts of Macbeth with King Lear, so I could be wrong about this, but I don't think I am. But my point is that it adds to my enjoyment when I'm able to see those themes built upon. So like 1984 is a classic, but Fahrenheit 451 is a classic. But I love when I can see how things that I'm taking in now are influenced by that.
Mm-hmm.
Like how Barsoom and Princess of Mars and Flash Gordon influenced Star Wars,
Mm-hmm.
and how Star Wars influenced one of my all-time favorite movies, The Fifth Element. And
The
so
Fifth Element
that's
is
what I mean.
amazing.
Like, yeah, and I enjoy it even more because I had watched Star Wars
Right.
before I saw that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
or even having watched A Fistful of Dollars and then watching one of your recommendations, which is Last Man Standing. So yeah, and by the way, Jeff, I can keep going on movies that I would recommend watching before Andor, but I would say this, and I'm really eager to hear your concepts on this. Like, it's my hope that Andor, based on its trailer, is like a political thriller,
Yes.
high tension thriller. There is only two things that Star Wars hasn't done yet: a thriller, like a real thriller,
Mm-hmm.
and then something like kind of crazy esoteric, like Sandman, like
Yes.
what you were talking about before. What are you hoping that this series is?
I'm hoping for two things. And actually, now that you've said some of this, you mentioned Robert Redford earlier, and I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up one of my favorite Robert Redford movies. I'm not a big Brad Pitt fan in general. Like, his stuff is good, but he doesn't like, oh, Brad Pitt, but him and Robert Redford in Spy Game, I love.
It's a great movie.
It is a great movie.
I have it on my list. I
can watch that movie literally. There's a handful of movies on my list that I can watch literally at any point, anytime. Oblivion with Tom Cruise, and I'm not a Tom Cruise fan, but Oblivion,
Yeah.
The 13th Warrior, because I love that movie.
Yeah.
Spy Game, and there's a couple others that are out there, but Spy Game is on it because the dialogue, the banter back and forth, the conversations, how you said the political thing. I was also going to say, like, a Patriot Games, the Jack Ryan style Hunt for Red October, like the Patriot Games, or those sorts of like political.
Clear and Present Danger.
Clear and Present Danger.
This,
Yes, Hunt for Red October.
This is going to be crazy. I don't have it on my list, but I was going to bring those up. Those Jack Ryan movies.
I love them.
To me,
I absolutely.
Yeah,
and the TV show, with I'm blanking on his name, but the TV show they did 2 seasons of on Amazon.
Oh yeah.
It was fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. I loved how they approached that character on it. Anyway, I want to see, and Chris, I'm totally with you, buddy. 13th Warrior is one of. I tried reading the book. I actually have the audiobook or the book, and I tried reading it, and I couldn't get through it. It was not super interesting. The adaptation is obviously a big adaptation. There's a lot of leaps taken in the movie for the 13th Warrior, but it's just so entertaining. It's just so fun to watch. Okay. Anyway, and Joanna's right. Hunt for Red October is one of the best. I love that movie. I adore it all day long. I'm still not sold on Sean Connery as Russian, but it doesn't matter. It's
I'm
fine.
not gonna lie
It's just
though.
a fun movie. But
It's one of
Sam
my
Neill,
favorite things.
I'm sold as Sam Neill as Russian. I will take him.
Sam Neill is like, it's like peak Sam Neill, and he's like
Yes.
talking about Montana.
Uh-huh.
But the thing that I love is the movie opens with them and they're all speaking Russian, and then the camera comes in, zooms in on on the political person talking. It zooms in on his mouth, and then when it zooms back out, he's speaking English now.
Yes.
So it's
Oh,
like
I
a
love
way
that.
of saying to the audience, like, yeah, okay, like we started in Russian, but we're not going to have you read subtitles for the rest of the movie.
Oh, and by the way,
so it's cool.
Can I just throw in there that one of I would say everyone should believe this, should agree with me on this. One of my favorite humans that is in that movie plays the Doctor, and it's a funny role that he plays. Tim Curry's in that too.
Tim Curry.
And he's Russian, and I freaking love Tim Curry because, Tim Curry. Anyway,
anytime I see someone doing something crazy on the freeway, I say "Crazy Ivan." They're called Crazy Ivan.
Like 50% of the time he'll do this. How'd you know? I had a 50-50 chance. Anyway,
50-50 chance.
Sorry. By the way, Tim Curry. I know we're getting way off topic here, but Tim Curry. By the way, everyone talks about everyone I know is like Tim Curry, famous for why am I blanking on the name?
So many things. He's a Clue.
No.
He's also Pennywise.
Sorry, before you go that, the burlesque type show. What? Oh my god, why am I blanking on the name? The drag show. What am I?
Oh my gosh.
The aliens.
Thank you. Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Rocky Horror Picture Show. I'm like, I can see his face, and I'm like, crap. Yeah. But as much as lots of people know him for that, I am a Pennywise. Like, I am stuck on. Anytime I see Tim Curry, thank you, Chris. Every single time I see Tim Curry, I cannot not picture him as Pennywise the Dancing Clown. I can't. Mm-hmm. Okay. Anyway, I bring this up. I bring those types of things up because one, I want to see things like the spy games and the Patriot games. Or those sort, that style, Hunt for Red October. But I also want to see a good mix of dystopian. I really want to see a good mix of dystopian stuff. So I mentioned Fahrenheit 451 and others. But I also want to see things like the darker side, the Soylent Green, the Soylent Green style, or the Logan's Run. And the reason why I like those so much, and even the 1984 for that matter, but putting 1994 aside for a minute, I like the others, like the Soylent Greens and the Logan's Runs, because in it, the people who are involved in the story, even Fahrenheit 451, our protagonists don't understand, or our anti-heroes don't understand what's actually happening, and they don't understand the system they're actually a part of until a point. And then it's the glass breaking moment. When they hit that point, the glass breaks and they can't unsee it. And it's not that they're automatically becoming just like, I'm going to go do the good work of saving all the people. That's not what's happening. In those style of movies, they're doing it because it hurts them so physically and at their core that not doing something would destroy them as a human to not do something. They're not really thinking about it like, I'm going to be the savior for the greater good. That's not why they do it. They do it because Soylent Green is people. You all have to know. But they're doing it because they're like, how can the rest of you not be and I'm hoping some sort of stylistic things like that come into Andor, where he's not just doing it because I'm going to be the good guy who goes and does the good things for all the other people. Yes, but it's much more complicated than that. It's much more nuanced than that. He has his own reasons, and it's not that he's being selfish. It's not that. He's doing it for his own reasons, like anybody in that position would do. Not because he's not trying to help a large portion of people, but I'm hoping it's because he's lived this for so long that it's just kind of like you're always kind of walking and leaning forward, and you never fall over because the earth is round and you just kind of keep leaning, and if you just kind of keep going as a result, the momentum is carrying you through. That's kind of what I hope to see, because I think it really reinforces the humanity behind the people and the characters that are in there. They're not just doing this because I made the decision one day that I'm going to go do this thing. Yes, that does happen for some characters, maybe a Mon Mothma or a Bail or whoever Stellan is playing. But for many others like Andor, I'm really hoping that's not their base, because I think it takes away a bit. It takes some of the nuance of why a character would do something like this out of it, and I don't like that. I want the character to be highly nuanced in a way that we don't even understand yet. I really want it to be that, because I want there to be some other hurt and trauma and pain that's involved in getting this person to this place, because it makes for a really rich and interesting story to tell.
No, you're talking about things like Soylent Green, and one of the things that Soylent Green does really well. And by the way, a couple of other like thrillers that I have on my list is things like They Live, is which with Rowdy Piper,
Oh God,
and then
that's a
by the way
name.
I
I've
see
heard that
that
name in so long.
yeah I also see Tim Curry. Just my favorite Tim Curry is Clue, but I'm a huge Clue
Oh,
fan.
true. Yeah.
Flames on the side of my face. So the thing that I wanted to bring up on this was your point about Soylent Green. And this is the thing that I think Andor can help explore. There's a sequence in Soylent Green that I want to say he's able to take a shower. And that's like a big deal because only the rich have that ability. And it like blows his mind because he goes up into one of the apartments. And by the way, like other movies have tried to do this, like Elysium. There was like a Matt Damon movie. There's a much better version of class distinctions and how that type of oppression can cause revolution, and that's like District 9. District 9's a really good example of that. But I just keep thinking of Soylent Green as one of those originals because Charlton Heston's character, it's like a noir film, but Charlton Heston's character is definitely on the poorer side of the world. And so because of that, there is this giant divide between the haves and the have-nots. And that's also something that you really get a sense of um, in the Andor trailer.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why, again, like all I have are these. I don't have like the Omega Man, which is another Charlton Heston movie out of that era. But I would say that any of those 1970s dystopian movies or thrillers
Mm-hmm.
would be a great primer because that's going to guide what they do with Andor.
Agreed. Mm-hmm.
And could not agree more on the political thrillers. There's one last political thriller. It's been a long time since I watched it, and I didn't put it on my list because I can't give it a full recommendation. But there is a movie that Kevin Costner did called No Way Out. And it's him and it's Sean Young, and it is them and it is a movie about trying to find. I'm not going to spoil this movie if you haven't watched it 'cause it's a great twist. They're trying to find a mole, a Russian mole in the military, and of course it's like peak Cold War, and if I'm right, it's kind of campy. You got to remember it's 80s Kevin Costner and Sean Young.
And Gene Hackman. Oh yes.
And yes,
Oh, Will Patton's in it. Oh my God!
yes.
Wow, that is a cast.
So if I remember correctly, it's a good movie. I didn't add it on my list because I haven't watched that movie in like maybe 20 years. So but I remember it was good, and I thought of all of these movies where it's someone who is hunting and being hunted at the same
Mm-hmm.
time. And that's Andor. Like that's Cassian Andor, hunting and being hunted. And that's why I thought of all of these things like 3 Days of the Condor. If you haven't watched that movie, it's got some weird sequences in it. It's hard, that relationship that he's got. It's a little bit weird. I don't get it, but it is what it is. But it really influences things like Captain America, Winter Soldier, which is my favorite of the Marvel movies. It really it really adds to things like No Way Out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm
Awesome.
really interested. I can't wait to see this movie, this show.
I'm so excited about it too. I mean, we've got Sandman's going on right now. We've got the Lord of the Rings show dropping in 2 weeks.
Yep.
Andor is what, end of September, mid-September? I forget the date at this point.
Yeah.
Now. Chris
we're weeks away from it.
Yeah, it's wild how much nerd. I don't want to, and I don't want to demean any of it, but like nerd centric, like space opera, sci-fi, fantasy content that looks just absolutely epic in the next
Yeah.
month and a half. Like
Yeah.
it is. This is, you said it earlier. Like this is the summer of sci-fi fantasy. Like this is the year for it, and I am just all on board because it is just amazing. It's not just
Yeah.
that we made a movie out of a comic book. This is like legitimately done, beautiful. Yeah, I can't say enough. It's awesome.
Yeah,
It is awesome.
it's been a great summer. Like, and I mean, by the way, like, there's also been some really great things that have been coming out of Marvel. If anybody watched Ms. Marvel, I
Oh,
know that they changed up her power sequence, but that was still solid, and it dealt with some serious issues
it
like
was
the
a beautiful
partition
show.
of India.
Yes.
It's a really solid show.
Hmm.
And again, I feel like a lot of people brought a lot of things to it, like with Solo, and so because of that, that it had its mixed reaction. Watch it again. Try to watch it. Try to leave your baggage at the door and see if you can give
Yeah,
it a shot.
I totally agree.
Because that, like Solo, if you didn't, again, I know that it's hard to separate the history from that movie, but I would agree with you. I actually really enjoy Solo.
I do too.
Enjoy it for what it is. It's a heist movie. Again,
It
like
is.
there's always these tropes that Star Wars is trying to play with. I'm excited about this trope because I love a political thriller. I love thrillers. So that's why, like, the early '90s was my jam. That was like filled with thrillers.
Hmm.
But uh the thing that I can't wait to see next is I want to see Star Wars do something weird.
Yeah, agreed.
I'd love to see like a weird Star Wars, like what's the
Wait, hold on,
weird version of
Ryan. So what you're saying is you want David Lynch to come in and do something now?
that's yes, give me the David Lynch Jedi, the Return of the Jedi. That movie would have been gross, but we'd still be like going crazy about it.
Totally.
Um,
Yes.
but no, in all honesty, you talk about 1984, Fahrenheit 451.
Hmm.
What's the weird version of that? The gentleman from Monty Python, his Brazil, with Jonathan Price. That movie is crazy. It's got Robert De Niro in it. That is a movie about an oppressive society, and the way that this person escapes is by their imagination. And
Oh,
so
dude.
then you see their life through their imagination and their ability to take flight. And it is at times like inspiring and then also just so sad that people are living like in that desperation for
Hmm.
freedom.
You
So
almost
yeah.
you made me think. Sorry, you said Robert De Niro, and I instantly thought of, in this vein. I instantly thought of Ronin, like
Oh, love Ronan.
like
Love
the
Ronan.
mole in a group doing something, and the group turns out to be something different. Oh, well, listen,
the
we're
the hunted and the being hunted again. Ronan is a and Stellan Skarsgård's in that.
he is, yes.
It is Ronan is a great primer for Andor, and it's got a team in it that they have to do a heist,
Yes.
and yeah, it's a great primer for
Jean
Rogue
Reno.
One.
Jean Reno
Uh,
is in that, and he's amazing.
and
There's just,
Jean
it's
Reno
such a good
playing a
cast.
good guy. Any movie where Jean Reno is playing a good guy, you can watch it. Even Godzilla, which is a terrible movie, but Jean Reno is in it. And from The Professional
Oh,
to
he is a total
yeah,
good guy in The
Ronan.
Professional. I argue that all
Yeah,
day long.
it's
Um,
amazing.
so we were planning on going a little short tonight because Ryan just got back from traveling and he's a little exhausted. So
Yes,
he would not tell you all this, but he is a little exhausted. We want to give him a break, but we ran.
it's currently 1 a.m. for me right
It
now.
basically is, yeah. But
Yes,
you know what? This was awesome, dude. I'm glad we were able to get through a lot of it because I think all of these are a really good way to get anybody prepped for the types of shows and, more importantly, the types of stories that are going to be told. It's what I
yeah,
like. I'll reinforce it. I think again that if you're gonna any of these if you are somebody who's been watching Star Wars or consuming Star Wars forever, you have an idea of what you're walking into. And some of the stuff that Ryan has been talking about tonight and a little bit of what I talked about will kind of just prime the pump and get you excited. But for anyone who's not into Star Wars or hasn't been into it, hasn't seen it in a long time, or never watched anything, I think all the movies you described in your list, Ryan, I think Joanna had a really good comment earlier. Maybe what we can do is do a little Twitter feed where just a bunch of tweets that say, here's recommended movies or books or whatever to read and consume before watching these. Yeah. Any of the ones you described are a really good way to get your mind in the state of, this is the type of story to expect. Forget the title Star Wars. Just put that aside. Like you said, put your baggage and your preconceived notions at the door. But leave the Star Wars behind. It doesn't matter. This is a story. Watch some of these movies. Get yourself prepped again, The French Connection, whatever. Get yourself ready again, and then go watch Andor. And then watch The Bad Batch or whatever, and see if that changes how the show comes across to you when you watch it.
Yeah, I think it's like a aperitif. I know it sounds like really like
some Underberg. Let's get some Underberg.
No, but you know what I mean. It's like a thing that's like gets you ready for the meal. You know what I mean? It's a great way to get. I like how you use prime the pump. It's a great way to get ready for this this series, because I think we're gonna be in for something really special. At least I'm hoping so. And we'll see about the other stuff with like Rings of Power. I know a lot of people are worried about it. I got my fingers crossed.
I have high hopes.
I think this could be good.
I'm excited. Super excited. Well, listen, we're going to bounce for tonight. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Anyone who was watching on TikTok, really appreciate it, too. Thanks for being here. We appreciate it. We'll be back next week. And we should have a guest with us again next week, which will be super fun. So stick in. Right. Chris and Joanna, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate having you all here. Have a wonderful night. And we will talk to you all very, very soon.
Hey, good night. Hey, bye, everybody.